This is Kate Histon, and you're listening to Studio Success Formula.
Welcome to the Studio Success Formula podcast, the business school for dance studio owners. And now for your host, Clint Salter.
Hello, dance studio owners. It's Clint Salter here from Studio Success Formula, and thanks for joining us on today's podcast. Today, our focus is on you. I'm really excited to be speaking with an extraordinary woman who focuses on helping people operate at their optimum capacity while reaching their maximum potential. My guest today is Kate Histon. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Clint. How are you going?
Very, very well. Really happy to have you on. So for those that don't know, Kate Histon has over 2 decades experience in the dance industry and over a decade experience as a successful teacher and business owner. Kate helps her clients learn how to merge creative expression with business acumen and to teach them how to challenge self-limiting thoughts and behaviors and replace them with strength and confidence, something that we all want, I think, Kate.
That's right, absolutely.
So, Kate, I'd love you to tell our audience a little bit how you got started in your career as a dance teacher and dance studio owner.
Sure. Well, I wanted to be a classical ballerina, and I trained in Newcastle under Tessa Maunder and then full-time with Marie Walton-Mahn. By my second year of full-time, I definitely went through a really deflating time. I felt actually felt, in all honesty, like I wanted a life. And I in my own head, I'd reached a peak. And then I used to fantasize about still having dance in my life, but also having a family and being able to eat what I wanted and just, going to social events and everything felt very, for me, I did reach that point that I think I knew deep down that I didn't want to pursue a career as a dancer, but I loved dance. So Marie guided me into a teaching career, and I worked at her school a bit. It's now the National College of Dance. And then when I was 19, I moved to Byron Bay by myself and took over a pre-existing school that had the previous years. It was quite a big school, but the owner had dropped all the jazz and all the contemporary and only decided that she wanted to teach 18 students because she was extending her family and just didn't love it anymore. So she was sourcing a teacher to come and just take over these little 18 kids and put them through their RAD exams. And I was young and single and still opportunistic, and I felt like, yep, this was something I had to do. So within 6 weeks of finding that information out, I moved up to Byron Bay and took on these 18 students back in 2000. And it was actually, what's the date? It was exactly, 14 years ago in 3 days.
Wow.
Wow.
Happy anniversary.
So the 24th of June is the actual date that I officially started teaching, walked in and taught, and I'd moved up. And it was quite overwhelming and it was very scary, but it was so exciting. I had no family in Byron Bay, knew no one at all, but 19 and just took on these kids. And then towards the end of that year, I built it up to 45 students, and we had a little concert at the end of the year. And then a year later, it was 100, and then we've built it up to 220 is where I actually keep my school at. So
Fantastic.
And that's a nice size for me and what I want.
That's great. And now, do you offer all types of dance styles now?
Yeah, so what I had to do as well, even though I did also learn as a dancer all different types of dance, except I'm not a tapper. I'm not good at tap. I can tap a little bit, but that's something that I definitely don't. And I can honestly put my hand up and say, yep, that's me. I don't really tap, even though I came from the home of Newcastle and the tap dogs.
Yes.
So I do everything. I can hip hop, I can jazz, I can contemporary, I can musical theatre. I wouldn't be the main teacher for musical theatre though, but my forte is ballet and contemporary for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for that background and a little bit of the journey that you've had. Firstly, going in as a performer, wanting to be a ballerina and coming out the other side and finding that passion to still have dance in your life, but as a teacher, as a studio owner, which so many people do. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. Our audience are all dance studio owners, so they completely, understand where you are and vice versa. So, as you know, being a studio owner can be stressful at times. And so what tips can you give our listeners on how they can transform that stress into empowerment?
Okay, well, look, firstly, I think it's really important for all teachers. Look, I know for me in the 14 years that I've had this school, I've really learnt so much about myself, and I'm not just a teacher, I'm a business owner, and I've had to learn all aspects of business as well. But one thing which I think is really important for business owners and teachers to do is to really get honest with themselves and to know what our personal strengths are and what's a weakness, so where we might feel not up to par in our jobs. And what I do is I work towards my strengths. So the things that I'm really good at, I make sure that I teach those classes, or aspects of the business, I make sure that I work on those things until if someone walked along and they were a little bit, better at me, and that I might delegate that, and then I might pick up another subject. But that's, for instance, I have had years where I have felt uninspired to teach ballet as much as I love it and it's my forte. I've had to just take a step back, and I've had someone else come in and teach that, and that's been really empowering for me to do. And also acknowledging where we might not be as efficient in our time. For instance, look, this year I'm teaching 34 classes a week, which is a lot, whereas 2 years ago I decided I only wanted to teach 9 classes a week. And I have that flexibility in my business where I can do that. I can really be in there and teach lots and lots of classes. I think there's about 58 classes a week at our school. So I can do that, or I can take a step back. The one thing that right now, because I am working so much, is some of the management part of the school. I've delegated a lot of aspects of that this year, whereas 2 years ago I was working more on the school. And look, that changes. I think with everything in life there's an ebb and flow, and I think just acknowledging and honouring that has allowed me to have a lot of personal growth in my life as well as in my job, and keep it inspiring. So that's one thing. And delegate. I think that's really important, is just to delegate. This year for me, I am actually delegating just the general conversations and phone calls with parents. I will deal with people that, it might be a little bit bigger, people that are performance students, but little questions like, should I arrive here? Things that people, when they're not reading their newsletters, I absolutely won't deal with that. I've had to delegate that. I just don't even have the time. And if I did, it would be very overwhelming. So I think, not trying to do everything is really, really important. That can be quite overwhelming. And I just think as well, knowing that we're not really saving the world, we're teaching children how to dance and keep it light and basic. And not necessarily our training basic. We want to give the best training that we can and make sure that we're continuing our growth. But realistically, it's about teaching kids to dance. We're not saving the world.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really about not complicating things.
Yeah,
don't make it difficult. Yeah, make it, keep it fun and exciting. I love what you said around, basically we're not going to know all things, and we shouldn't have to do all things. We get clients coming to us, studio owners, that say, Clint, we're going to build the website ourselves. And I'm like, why would you go through that stress? When you can outsource it and get it done, for a couple of $100 really now. I mean, why would you put yourself through knowing a big skill? Things that we always say to clients is that exactly delegate and find people who can help you. That's what they do for a job. That's what they do for a living. So bring those people on board. And generally it's not for a great expense, in terms of, you think about the time that you'll save, the energy that you'll save, how much more happier you'll be not having to deal with something that you don't have the knowledge and expertise in, and stick to what you love and what you do well. And for every dance studio owner, that's different. It could be teaching, it could be more of the business side of things, it could be around costuming. I mean, there's so many different aspects of what a studio owner has to do, but that's great advice. And all of those things, the 3 main core things you've just mentioned there, are going to lower stress levels.
Oh, for sure. And look, for me as well, family time, having downtime and fun with my family, where we laugh a lot in my family. And I think My Sundays are just great. They're gold because we laugh, we do silly things, we have fun. And I think honouring the family and coming back and having a great time is a real fantastic stress relief.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's studio owners out there that are quite young, who might not have families yet or might not have a partner. And for them, it's really, I say, go and plan a great fun day with your friends or with your, with your mum or with your dad or brothers and sisters, and just really disconnect for a day. You should,
absolutely.
You totally can spend 24 hours away from the studio.
Oh, yes, you need to.
Yeah, you certainly do. Now, look, a lot of studio owners face challenging times, which can deflate them and make them question why they're doing what they do. Can you explain to our listeners what they can do when they feel like they're losing purpose or they're unsure of their direction?
For sure. I know that one all too well. That's happened a few times.
I'm sure it has.
And, look, I think knowing me when I'm feeling lost, it's usually my little sneaky thing is I might have in the past just really compared myself to other people or schools, or it's really an expectation in my own head of where I think I should be, and not really what I have to do is sit down, take stock, get clear with what my expectations are. What's the fantasy in my head of what I think I should be doing? When we're feeling overwhelmed, it's usually because there's this picture in our heads, and some people aren't even aware of it, but there's a picture and a tape going on in the head of what we think we should be doing, and we're not meeting that expectation. So the best thing to do, and I do it for myself, is get a pen and paper and write down everything. How do I want it to be? If I have a certain expectation that people should be acting a certain way around me, or, I have to write that down, and I think, well, that's actually pretty delusional, expecting that people should be a certain way around me. Why? What am I trying to get out of that? What really do I need, and what really can I give myself, instead of trying to seek it from other people? It might also be, I think my school should be here, or I think it should be achieving this. Okay, right now it's not. What can I do to create those goals? So pen to paper is a really good thing, and get the fantasy or the expectation written out on paper, and then either chunk it down with some good goals, or if it is a little bit unrealistic, maybe just get real. Because I think, look, a lot of unrealistic expectations that we as owners have on our students and parents, or our own selves or business, can really be deflating and can cause a little bit of depression. So I think acknowledging where we're at, being real about what's a realistic goal, and creating a process to create that. And, sometimes having a third party, someone else that can sit outside of ourselves and just check in and mentor or facilitate that process is not a bad idea. So let me just see, and I've got a little note here as well for getting back to the core of what our culture is about, what our school's about, and why did we start our school in the first place? Why do we want to be a dance teacher? I
always say that, Simon Sinek talks about, start with why. So going back to that, like for you, it would have been when you moved to Byron, you moved to Byron and took over that school. It's like, what is that big why? Why is it that you do what you do? Get back to that core. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's that's something that I personally go back to quite a bit, because I had a very big drive for why I wanted a school and why I want my school to be different, and what is going to set my school apart from the rest. And it was never really developed intelligently for business. It was a very emotional impulse, and it was something very dear to me that I really wanted to inspire children and learn how to dance in a nurturing environment, yet still get results, and not it to be just a dance for fun, but really improve and get some good dancers developed in an environment where they feel they can flourish. Anyway, that's my little thing.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I always say I've never met a dance studio owner who says I started my studio because there was a gap in the market, or it was a great commercial opportunity. It's always driven from this kind of passion, from something that they love, that they want to give, and I love that, because you can't teach that. You can teach someone how to run a solid and sustainable business as a dance studio, but you can't teach them how to wake up every morning, most mornings, and feel inspired to make a difference to, the students in your dance families.
Absolutely. And I think lots of dance schools start out like that, and they're usually hobby businesses, but then the whole next element is how to keep that passion alive and turn it into a real business that can actually profit.
Exactly. Yeah. So many of them get stuck in that space, and then
deflated and not know how to handle the things like criticisms or complaints, and taking it a bit personally. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit of that because that's a big one. Now, look, I love the work of Dr. John Demartini. I know you're a facilitator in the Demartini method. I'd love you to share with us one of your favourite philosophies of his that would benefit our studio audience.
Yeah, he's got some great stuff. One good piece of gold, I love this one, is that, you will never receive a praise without a criticism. So lose the need to always seek praise. I think that's a really big one. And I tell you what, I see it a lot on social media, and a lot of teachers and just people posting things and not receiving, just both positive and negative feedback. And it happens every day. We're in the industry where we are creative and we perform, and we're teaching children how to perform and to seek positive feedback from judges, really.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that is really important for us as studio owners to know is to how to receive negative feedback, because if we don't know it, how are we going to expect our students to be humble and just receive feedback that may not be what we want to hear? So it's not personal. And look, one thing that John Demartini always drummed into us as facilitators, and one of his philosophies is that at any moment when you're receiving a praise, he said, someone will be giving you the opposite energy from another direction, a negative comment. So the premise of that, though, is to humble us, to keep us balanced and to keep us in check. So not necessarily to go off with the mania of being, look, we won first place. Yeah. He goes, you know what? You've won today, and whatever goes up must come down. That's the physics principles. I think I allow myself, for instance, we've got an Eisteddfod tomorrow, we've got Mulholland Bar, and what I do is I actually don't hang around necessarily for the adjudication. I have a parent that will write the notes. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I'm not a teacher that will be fixated and has to listen. And I let my girls perform, and I go backstage with them. They get ready for their next performance, and then usually a parent will run in and tell me the result, and I go, okay, that's great, good, yep. And I like to, not that I get excited with the girls, but I like to just play it a bit cool, because ultimately it's not I'm not really one for drumming in the real the hype in the kids. I just don't necessarily think that positive is beneficial for the kids. I think it's about performance and learning how to enjoy performing and take negative feedback, not with a grain of salt. Take it in, learn from it, look about your corrections, and then move forward. I'm not sure if I've answered that correctly.
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you're saying. And, I've adjudicated and judged a lot of Eisteddfods in competitions and seen many, many dance routines over the year. And I think, what's really important is that whether they win or lose, I mean, you would have been to competitions where your kids might have won and you thought, wow, they actually weren't really their best today, as a
absolutely.
team. And then there'll be other times where they really nailed the routine and they were fantastic, and they might not have won, but they did such a brilliant job. And so it should be, I like to think of it more as basing it on that performance, on how the kids were on that day, on what they bought, and then learning all the time, because we win and lose in life all the time. And we know that at a competition or a Eisteddfod, it's generally one or two people's opinion of that, of just that moment on that day.
Absolutely. And, look, there are going to be people that what may not like the performance. And it's, not even just about the performance. For instance, me as a teacher, I live in a small town, and there, as much as for me it's very important that I do a good job and serve the community, there will be people that go to other dance schools because for some reason they may not like my style. They may not, and I think just a part of life, and accepting that is the most liberating thing I think anyone can do.
Yep, and totally. And the other thing is that, I call it like amplified authenticity. If you're putting yourself out there about what you're about, what your studio's about, the values that you have, and you're clear on your ideal students and parents, you're going to bring in the most beautiful families into your studio.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I agree with you. And ones that I know for me might be a little bit, I don't know if they're, really a bit too overly competitive, putting pressure on the kids. Like I may have some. It's amazing, for me as I've gotten older with my school, the ability to actually just be calm and accept people for who they are. Then they become who you really do connect with and enjoy. So for me, I do try that, not judging your clients. You're going to get people that have different values to who you are as a person. But I think one of the important things is to learn to link the values of communication. So how can the values that I have serve this student, and how can their values serve the school, and make that connection too. And then successful relationships flourish from that. It's quite empowering.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. Now, look, we've touched on this, but being able to communicate effectively with parents, staff and students is really crucial as a studio owner. And, we deal a lot with this in the Studio Success Formula program, but I'd love you to talk about how, studio owners can effectively handle conflict or complaints in the studio, because sometimes it can get a little bit too emotional and personal and become quite a reactive conversation. So what are your tips around that?
Breathe.
That's
Look,
always a good start.
I think it depends. I've got a structural process that I follow. I have actually, it sounds a bit silly, but and I haven't used it too many times. I have had to use it a couple of times. Just a complaint form. If a parent has wanted to make a formal complaint, and usually that may be via email or something like that, I file it. And it might be if they've had a complaint about a teacher. I feel like my daughter, I don't know, I'm making up something off the top of my head, but maybe student A didn't like the way student B was speaking to her in class, and maybe the teacher didn't see it or something. Things happen. And I may get an email, it might come through the school, and then small complaints, I have an assistant who actually handles small complaints or little queries that parents might just want to touch up on. Look, this happened, does that mean this, or little light complaints. Then the big ones that I'll handle them, and I might ring them up. What I do is, firstly, allow people to be heard. Everyone has their own reality. And, we're all like a big jigsaw puzzle. We're our own little piece in a massive big picture. And parents hear pieces and pockets of information from their children, and they may go home and say something, and the parent might ring up and they are relaying information from a child. Let them talk, let them be heard, understand them, and let them feel accepted for just voicing their opinion, and then fill in the other side of the picture just calmly. And I think the biggest thing is to not take it personally. They're just expressing their reality, and you've got your reality. And then all that really needs to happen is just a match of realities. Look, I have had people in the past that we've resolved a conflict, lots of conflicts just by doing that. And it actually hasn't been harsh, or it doesn't need to be anything that's got to be a heated, volatile situation. And I think, look, usually if that does arise, they're really not the right people anyway for your school. So, I think learning some skills on how to communicate, and just the premise that understanding people do have different realities from you, and it is okay, and speaking in terms of their values, understanding what's important to the parent and to the child, why they're at your school. For instance, I don't know, if you're a small school that maybe never does the Stedfords, you might get an overly competitive, a child that really, really wants to do a Stedfords, and instead of taking on that student, you could take on that student, but then may feel the pressure of the parent to do a Stedfords, for instance, but you may not want to do a Stedfords. I think that would be gracious for the studio owner to say, look, maybe try this school, they do a Stedfords. So, because those values don't really match up. So being gracious and let that go is a good idea and not take it personally. I've had lots of people over the past communicate with me in a way of giving me ideas and telling me how they think I can enhance my school, and some ideas I have taken on and some I have decided not to because that's really not what I want for my school. And so I've just communicated that in a way of thank you, that's a good idea, but no thank you. And it's not personal. It's the best advice I can offer.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love it. And I think that's great advice. I think the first thing you said about breathing is really important as well. Because if you and occasionally parents will catch you on the fly when you're doing 100 other things. And
if I can interrupt you a second,
sure.
I'm not into, if parents, I don't have the time to talk in between classes with parents, so they know that is not a good time. I actually say to them, look, I can't talk right now because I have children behind me that are waiting for a class. And lots of my parents know this, but some new ones may not.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I will say, look, you can ring Jane if you need to. That's my assistant right now. You can ring Jane. She's great and she's really approachable. You can chat with her, or I can ring you tomorrow between this time and this time. But I'm going now because I think, you know what, it's a real lack of duty of care to actually handle complaints then and there with kids waiting to be taught, and that's really inappropriate. And just because someone might be heated, do not give in that. No, that's not the right time to deal with things as in between classes at all. I would be very, very strong and very clear and still kind. When I say strong, I don't mean hard and nasty, but very clear and firm that no, now is not the time to discuss this. I'm really happy to talk to you tomorrow. However, right now I need to take care of these children. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah, exactly. No, completely agree with you there. We hear a lot about work-life balance, and many studio owners will say to us, that it doesn't exist. And personally, I like to call it life, and I just make sure that I've got, a good balance in each of my different areas, and I'm enjoying each of them. What tips do you have for studio owners specifically so that they can find some balance? I think what you mentioned about having Sunday as, a switch off, disconnect family day is really important. What else would you suggest to them?
Oh, look, I personally think exercise is really important, going for walks, keeping up our own personal fitness, like separate from teaching classes, because even teaching classes, we can find ourselves just directing, and there's some periods of the year where we aren't dancing as much because we're correcting or we're choreography might be over. So I would like beach walks. Also, I find that the more you love your business, the more life balance is just, it becomes innate. And I personally think for me, I'm teaching a lot this year, and I do think about my business a lot, but I love it. It's not a stress. My main concern is that my family and my children feel loved and that I'm giving them enough attention as well. So look, I think there's things that people can do, like, go for coffee with friends, enjoy that social time, go for a walk and have a switch off time, a switch off button. But then also, the more productive we can become, the more that when we're not at work, we're really genuinely enjoying our time. So the more organised, if we're up to date with emails, then when we're actually not at work, we really are present with our friends and family or going for that beach walk. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. I think the more organised we are with work, we can then switch off effectively. Whereas if there's niggly things that we really haven't attended to, we can still be with our family, but we're thinking about work. I like to think of being super organised in the business and then switching off. You feel like you really are having a rewarding time with the family and friends and yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's great. That's excellent advice. So look, running a studio means that you'll need to make some business decisions as the business grows, which means changes occur. And sometimes when we're on the edge of change, fear can creep in. So how can a studio owner deal with fear and turn it into confidence as a driver to move them forward instead of staying where they are?
Well, fear is not an enemy, it's a friend, and it's just feedback. And look, I don't think fear is a bad thing. I think fear is sometimes telling us that it depends how much fear and why. It's such an individual subject. I hear what you're saying, and I think that fear, what do they say, false evidence appearing real, and, we can still be fearful right before we're going out on stage, and then it feels great. No matter what, every single change will always bring a level of fear and anxiety because it's the unknown, and that's normal. It's a normal human emotion. So I think understanding and accepting that is probably a big part of it, not trying for things to be perfect before we get through, having them 80% there and then just going for it. The perfectionists in life, and I know I'm one of them, I'd say letting go of the premise of needing everything to be perfect before we step forward, because I feel that a lot of us will not step forward because not everything will always meet perfection. But as long as it's 80% there, then stepping forward, that's one thing. And then I do think in some situations, especially, in the positive thinking movement, I have seen a lot of people actually not listen to their fear, because in some situations it's been wise to not take the step forward and to not actually make the change because the fear has actually had a little bit of wisdom in it. So every situation is different. But I think it would be really important to have someone you can talk to about things if you're making a big change, and see if it's a good investment or not. I have had some friends who have not listened to their fear and stepped in and made some decisions that weren't so profitable or fantastic and have been a little bit detrimental. So it is situational, and it's something that I suppose I feel like I can't answer generically, but That's my best generic answer.
Yeah, sure. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Look, I've loved our conversation today. I'm sure that the studio owners that have been listening have got some really great and practical advice of how they can apply it into themselves and also into their studio. Now, if our listeners want to hear more about you, where can they head, Kate?
I've got two websites of my dance school, is byrondancedynamics.com.au, or there's katehiston.com, and my surname is spelled Histon.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much again for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having a chat with you today.
No worries, Clint, and thank you and good luck with studio success.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Studio Success Formula podcast. To take your studio to the next level and beyond, head to studiosuccessformula.com.